Okay, this is part 2 of chapter 2 of For the Children's Sake, beginning on page 42. Living ideas from outside of the child. Boredom has a stranglehold on many children's lives today. How can they be helped to escape from it? What steps can we take to ensure the plaintive words, "I'm bored," are rarely heard? For the truth of the matter is that babies and young children explore new experiences with tireless enthusiasm. A girl or boy has a mind which is hungry for ideas. The 4-year-old is often full of eager questions. Any parent of a preschooler knows how frustrating it can be taking young children out for a walk through the park if you want to get anywhere fast. Their curiosity keeps stopping them. They kick stones, jump off logs, lie down flat to watch a beetle. In the same way, it is easy to be drawn into reading. One more story, please, just one more. And while bedtime recedes further and further away, the children are hungry. They have an appetite for knowing and experiencing. It is the strong, real world that interests them so much, where the unexpected can happen and there is wonderful mystery. Children have a voracious appetite and ability to learn in their first 5 years. Parents who provide for their growth will have enthusiastic, outgoing, and creative children. If their children are the reflective type, this will provide a depth which builds quiet confidence. Having been treated as persons, they are secure. This means they've been loved, respected, talked with, listened to, and read to. They have shared experiences with the family and have had freedom to play alone and with friends. Such children will be eager to exploit life without a sense of boredom. They will think and express their thoughts, and they are eagerly trying to master new skills. Why does the school institution often blunt this interest? The child at school sooner or later has doing changed to mastering skills. Often he has his initiative subordinated to a schedule which has been worked out according to pragmatic factors other than his creativity and needs. He has to try to become interested in hours of listening to talking. There may be no time for him to talk or to even express himself. Worse, the books provided are often weak, watery, and insipid. Charlotte Mason's comments on home education all too often still apply. We put into the children's hands lesson books with pretty pictures and easy talk, almost as good as storybooks. But we do not see, after all, we are giving them little pills of knowledge in the form of a weak and copious diluent. Teachers and even parents who are careful enough about their children's diet are so reckless as to the sort of mental ailment offered to them that I am exceedingly anxious to secure consideration for this question of the lessons and literature for little people. She's writing here about children under 9, but the principles are the same at any age. We see then that the children's lessons should provide material for their mental growth, should exercise the several powers of their mind, should furnish them with fruitful ideas, and should afford them with knowledge really valuable for its own sake, accurate and interesting, of the kind that the child may recall as a man with profit and pleasure. Later on in the same book, we see that she was indeed hitting the nail on the head. Have you ever met college professors who bewailed the standard of the incoming students' past education? How well are children from uneducated homes helped at school? Is a new world of literacy and understanding open to them? Are they given new opportunities? Children who are the products of the scheme which is described below do have a chance to achieve their potential. It is a plan based on the assumption that all children are persons and are waiting to have doors opened for them. First, Charlotte Mason devoted many pages to outlining a most sensible plan for teaching, reading, writing, and number work itself. The lessons are structured and fitted to the child's need. These are mechanical skills, and each step is mastered before the next is taken. Many learning difficulties would not arise if this sort of basic thought-out teaching service was provided to children when they were ready and at their level and speed. Meanwhile, as we shall see later on, Charlotte Mason ensured that the child was read to. Not isolated little stories, but really good books, chapter by chapter. Those fortunate pupils had stories about all sorts of things: biographies of historical figures, works of literature, stories about faraway places, fables, stories about animals and birds. Always really good books, chosen carefully by the criterion that a book should be really valuable for its own sake, accurate and interesting, and the kind that the child may recall with pleasure. All this reading isn't crammed in. After just one story, the little child tells back what he has heard. Charlotte Mason called this narration. It is wonderful that the mind that has heard can now express the interest and knowledge in the child's own words. No prompting or questioning, no normalizing or sermons. The most common and monstrous defect in the education of the day is that the children fail to acquire the habit of reading. Knowledge is conveyed to them by lessons and talk, but the studious habit of using books as a means of interest and delight is not acquired. This habit should begin early, so as soon as the child can read, he should read for himself and not to himself. History, legends, fairy tales, and other suitable matter. He should be trained from the first to think that one reading of any lesson is enough to enable him to narrate what he has read, and he will thus get the habit of slow, careful reading, intelligent even when it is silent, because he reads with an eye to the full meaning of every clause. Narration is such an obvious natural response to the enjoyable experience of reading. I believe that is why it works like magic. Try it for yourself. Read the child a good tale full of interest, then say to him, "Can you tell me the story?" As he puts it into words, he has to think for himself. He uses his memory and he is attending deeply, but his own reactions and expressions are involved in his total human activity. You don't need to reduce the child's appreciation of an elementary true-false test. The child has acquired knowledge, and having expressed it creatively in his own words, he will be able to remember what he has learned. Educationalists replying to such arguments today will often agree that there is a good value in reading, but will point to the large number of books used in education as resource material. Children have perfectly adequate access to books, as it is often maintained, but that's not the same thing. It was Charlotte Mason's conviction that a child should work steadily through a complete book. Little snippets of information here and there just don't hang together. Our generation is prone to amuse itself with fragmentary information and resources. We flip on the TV for brief programs, and then we think we know about the subjects they dealt with. A few paragraphs in a magazine, and we think we've formed an opinion. What is happening so often is that we are merely performing a habit of amusing our interests and then forgetting the fragments. This is not education. Children benefit from working steadily through a well-chosen book, and if they narrate it to you, it will become theirs. But more happens. Because they've tackled a complete book, they become acquainted with its flow and its use of language. They are students of another person, the author. Further, they are allowed to notice the content themselves. As they aren't forced to memorize facts, they are free to react to the writing themselves. They are the ones who decide what parts they consider important. It becomes an active experience of the mind, personality, and language. The tiny child loves to be read to. Later on, he'll master the art of reading on his own. Then he'll be ready to read some of the real books for himself. The age that this happens can vary between 4 and 9 and 10 years old. He should have practice, too, in reading aloud for the most part, in the books he is using for his term's work. These should include a good deal of poetry to accustom him to the delicate shades of meaning, and especially to make him aware that words are beautiful in themselves, that they are a source of pleasure and are worthy of the honor, and that a beautiful word deserves to be beautifully said, with a certain roundness of tone and precision of utterance. In this connection, the teacher should not trust to setting, as it were, a copy in reading for the children's imitation. They do imitate readily enough, catching tricks of emphasis and action in an amusing way, but these are mere tricks and aping of intelligence. The child must express what he feels to be the author's reading, and this sort of intelligence comes only from the habit of reading and understanding. Observe the Charlotte Mason has respected the child's ability to find the meaning and express himself without a middleman. Literary power. The next point is so important that we shall consider it in several ways. The child needs books with literary power. We do not live in a generation which, in practice, sets much value on the enjoyment of expression or of literary power. If C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, the Apostle Paul, Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Carl Sandburg, for instance, should have the unlikely experience of being in a typical school for several days, would they find any enjoyment in the material read by and to the third grade? The 6th, 8th, and 11th grades? Would they be able to enjoy a relationship with fascinating growing persons? Would they enjoy the family's reading before bed every evening, or the conversation around the supper table? Would they perhaps be fascinated and stimulated by spending a month of Sundays in each Sunday school class at each level? If not, why not? In all probability, our distinguished visitors would hate the entire experience. Their minds would wander to the clouds floating outside the window. They would play truant mentally and or physically. There are 2 reasons why. 1, they would hate the endless restrictions and meaningless time-consuming rituals, the lack of time to do things they want. They would hate being shut away from the outdoors and the cheerful give and take of people at ease with each other. 2, they would be depressed by twaddle. We have never been so rich in books, but there has never been a generation when there is so much twaddle in print for children, much of it in schools. Many school readers, textbooks, colorful picture books, and Sunday school papers make a poor contrast to the magnificence of words such as, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Why not keep our imaginary visitors' work as a standard? Consider Lewis, Tolkien, Paul, Shakespeare, Wordsworth, and Sandburg. A child has not begun his education until he has acquired the habit of reading to himself, with interest and pleasure, books fully on a level of his intelligence. I'm speaking now of his lesson books, which are all too apt to be written in the style of insufferable twaddle, probably because they are written by persons who have never chanced to meet a child. All who know children know that they do not talk twaddle and do not like it, and prefer that which appeals to their understanding. Their lesson books should offer matter for their reading, whether aloud or to themselves. Therefore, they should be written with literary power. As for the matter of these books, let us remember that children can take in ideas and principles, whether the latter be moral or mechanical, as quickly and clearly as we do ourselves, perhaps more so. But detailed processes, lists, and summaries blunt the edges of a child's delicate mind. Therefore, the selection of their first lesson books is a matter of grave importance, because it rests with these to give children the idea that knowledge is supremely attractive and that reading is delightful. Once the habit of reading his lesson books with delight is set up for a child, his education is not completed, but ensured. He will go on for himself in spite of the obstructions which school too commonly throws his way. Charlotte Mason understood that knowing given lists of facts parrot-wise is not even the beginning of education. Hello. She satisfied the minds of young persons with substantial, interesting, well-written material that they could think about. She let them enjoy beauty in nature, writing, art, music, and the Bible as God's word to them. She left them precious childhood hours free to climb trees, explore woods, walk, ride, and what have you. In education, fashions come and go. What is beautiful about Charlotte Mason's view is that it corresponds to the way things really are. It aims to provide the child with a balanced approach in which his various needs will be met. He will be able to know objective truths and form relationships within life. Charlotte Mason respected the unity of the person, mind, soul, and spirit, or his physical self. Everything comes under the direction of the great giver of wisdom and life, the Holy Spirit. As we will see, she believed that education had to include the proper use of books. She said that reading the Bible directly and systematically would in itself educate the mind, but she made wide and varied use of literary books covering every field. That is what she meant by liberal education. She expected a lot from quite ordinary children, and they loved it. What are living books, which form a part of the daily nutrition proper for a child? We should be deeply thankful that we live in a time when there is such a wealth of good books available in the English language. It is a great responsibility to choose books, whether from home, school, curriculum, or church. One must again remember that education does not happen only at school. The family, in fact, may be the only source of true education available to some children. At school, they may well not be given any imaginative food at all, or conversely, it may be the child's home that never feeds the mind. That child needs must be met in other places, such as school or church. The short selection which follows is the books with which our own family has enjoyed together. If one were considering a curriculum, one would have to have a formal, comprehensive list covering all the necessary subjects. But these are some of our family's living books, and they only serve as personal examples. Okay. So here's the list. The Bible, Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, Tanglewood Tales by Nathaniel Hawthorne, The Chronicles of Narnia series by C.S. Lewis, Hans Christian Andersen's Fairy Tales, Brother Grimm's Fairy Tales, Peter Rabbit and Other Books by Beatrix Potter, Just So Stories by Rudyard Kipling, Little House on the Prairie series by Laura Ingalls Wilder, The Secret Garden, Abraham Lincoln by Ingrid and Edgar Delaire, The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, Johnny Tremaine by Esther Forbes, Carry On, Mr. Broadwich by Jean Lee Latham, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, Kon-Tiki by Thor Heyerdahl, Oliver Twist and Hard Times by Charles Dickens, Williams Shakespeare's plays read aloud as plays for shared pleasure, Try the Merchant of Venice and Twelfth Night, Robert Frost poetry, The Oxford Book of English Verse, The Wheel on the School, The House of 60 Fathers, and Other Books by Meredith de Jong, The Heroes of Asgard by A. and E. Carey, The Silver Sword by N. Serrelier, The Sheldon Book of Verses, A Wrinkle in Time and Other Books by Magdalene L'Engle, Ring Out Bows and Bells by Cynthia Harnett, Princess and the Goblin and Other Books by George MacDonald, The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. And special mention goes to the Christian stories beloved now for 2 generations. Star of Light, Tanglewood Secrets, Treasures of the Snow, and Rainbow Garden by Patricia St. John. Education, said Lord Haldane some time ago, is a matter of the spirit. No wiser word has been said on the subject, and yet we persist in applying education from without as a bodily activity or emollient. We begin to see light. No one knoweth the things of man but the spirit of man which is in him. Therefore, there is no education but self-education, and as soon as a young child begins his education, he does so as a student. Our business is to give him mind stuff. Both quality and quantity are essential. Naturally, each of us possess this mind stuff only in limited measure, but we know where to procure it, for the best thought the world possesses is stored in books. We must open books to children, the best books. Our own concern is abundant and orderly serving. I am jealous for the children. Every modern educational movement tends to belittle them intellectually, and no one more so than a late ingenious attempt to feed normal children with the pap meat which may be good for the mentally sick. Okay, so that was a Charlotte Mason quote, I think. Let's go back. I am jealous for the children. Every modern educational movement tends to belittle them intellectually, and no one more so than a late ingenious attempt to feed normal children with the pap meat, which may be good for the mentally sick. And there's a question mark behind which may. Okay. Let me try to indicate some of the advantages of the theory I am urging. It fits all ages, even the 7 ages of man. It satisfies brilliant children and discovers intelligence in the dull. It secures attention, interest, and concentration without effort on the part of the teacher or the taught. Children, I think, all children, so taught express themselves in forcible and fluent English and use a copious vocabulary. Over 30 years ago, it occurred to me that a series of curricula might be devised embodying sound principle and security, that children should be in a position of less dependence on their teacher than they were. In other words, that their education should be largely self-education. A sort of correspondence school was set up, the PNEU school, the motto of which I am, I can, I ought, I will, has much effect in throwing children upon the possibilities, capabilities, and duties determining the power belonging to them as persons. The self-education begins with listening to carefully chosen books read aloud to the child every day. He then sometimes tells back in his own words what he has heard, or he may draw a picture to illustrate what has happened with his imagination. When older, that same child will read for himself and write essays which narrate some part of what he has read. The young child of 6 will spend 20 minutes a day of whatever is practical, learning the mechanics of reading and writing. All children are different. There is no normal age when the child is ready, and the speed of mastery will vary enormously. This process should be carried out in a friendly, quiet, regular, and structured way. A child should never be made to feel that he is lagging behind others of his age. We don't harass babies of 18 months to walk if they still crawl. Einstein only started talking at 4 years. By being allowed to learn at their own speed, the children taught by Charlotte Mason were happy with their mastery of skills. They did not fail or pass. They learned how to read and write accurately. A high standard was expected, but at a level appropriate to the child's ability. It was like climbing one's own private ladder. It was not to be like a race. Good little Sally made only one mistake. She gets an A. But poor struggling Johnny tried to do his best, and he's rewarded with a D. How can Johnny ever take a proper joy in the fact that he learned a new step? When one 3-year-old in the family learned to ride a bike, we all clapped and smiled. Another time, another child with quite different gifts learned to ride a 2-wheeler at 6 years. Such smiles. He was as pleased as Punch with himself, and that was as it should be. The Bible teaches us that we are like parts of a body. In other words, we are different from each other, and we all have different gifts. How immoral to apply an arbitrary yardstick to the little child and expect him to progress at some normal speed. We take from him the joy of accomplishing new skills, which should be part of growing up. We often combine frustrating skill learning techniques with sawdust books. Try instead the other Christian approach. Expect high standards, but let them be appropriate to the individual who is progressing at his own rate of development. Make the lesson a short one so the inattention does not become a habit. Follow the skill lessons with a varied diet of mind food. It's pretty good. For example, when you read at home, you are shaping the interest of a short gospel story. You are sharing the interest of a short gospel story, followed by, say, a chapter of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. There is no question of failing or passing. Instead, there is joy. Afterward, if the child tells you the story back, you might comment, "That was especially good tonight. I like the way you described the woods." Excellence is a habit. One 4-year-old's level of attainment may fully equal that of another 8-year-old. That does not mean that the 8-year-old is inferior. Both may be excellent in their work, attention, and effort. All children should have an excellent diet of mind food to be nurtured on, so that their true education can begin. All children deserve great care in the building skills of literacy and numeracy to build a foundation upon which they can carry on their own education at a later stage. Let us apply this principle to the actual detailed practice in schools or homes. A 7-year-old happens to need a short period of phonic practice, followed by reading a story out loud to you haltingly every day. He then laboriously concentrates on learning the mechanics of writing for 10 to 15 minutes. This does not mean to say that his mind should be left frozen at the level of his skills. When the essential regular practice has been completed, the child puts all his little books and papers away and turns his full attention to the adult. She will now be the medium through with which he can read real books, not second-rate books. Perhaps she reads a short portion from Pilgrim's Progress. She must, of course, be a person who wants to understand and enjoy the story, or act out the episode in play. They could make a scroll, as our children did in the pt2 school. As the pilgrim proceeds through the various experiences, the children draw pictures of what they remember in the story. They end with the knowledge that life is a pilgrimage. They hear about the river at the end. By the way, this is the only book that the PNEU recommended to be slightly abridged. Pilgrim's Progress will be read perhaps twice a week. And after this, the children's next lesson might be a chapter of well-written biography of a historical figure. Again, the children listen with interest and build up knowledge, and so one proceeds. Science books will not be written in second-grade language, choosing an interesting book that really explains things in lively language. Perhaps you will start with one of the animals and plants the child can see in his environment. Again, you read a short while. The children respond with a narration. You stop before they become restless. The morning's program is intense, interesting, but faintly short. It finishes early, leaving the child to relax and be. By the time such educated children are 9 or 10, they will, of course, have been reading for themselves for a long time. They will be ready to read Shakespeare play, more on that later, and they will enjoy and understand a really rich diet of books, essays, letters, plays, and poetry. They will have thought, discussed, and shared these ideas along with their own personal ideas. Is this idealistic? Does it work? The answer is yes. I had a child of 6, Kirsten, in a bright little school. She was happy enough and learned to read and write after a fashion. There were hamsters, plants, paints, and lots of little booklets. There were special TV programs, the cute sort, that are intended to grab the child's attention. When she came home, she sometimes talked about something that had happened, but there wasn't much to discuss. Kirsten's older sister, Margaret, was faring worse at ages 9 and 10. She was frustrated, had a low opinion of her own achievement, and had no interest in education. One January day, God opened a door for them into a school where true education was going on. This was a small PNEU school run in a classroom built onto the back of someone's private home, looking into an English country garden. After the first day, Kirsten came home glowing with life and interest. We had the most exciting story today, but Mrs. Norton stopped at just the wrong place. I can't wait to hear the next part of the story. And what was this exciting, vitalizing story? To my astonishment, it was the Pilgrim's Progress, read to them in the original. The quite electrifying change in those two children is really indescribable. They had so much to talk about, a wealth of literature, history, art, which was so glorious to walk through. Their eyes became brighter and their minds alert. We had grand discussions again and again. Shakespeare became a friend whose writings was much loved. The children would argue about the actual characters, for instance, whether Hermione was right or wrong, and what the old shepherd was actually up to. They were enjoying The Winter's Tale. The children read every Friday part of Shakespeare's play, each taking a different part. This from age 9. Once a year, they would act one of the plays in the garden. In this way, they would enjoy 3 Shakespeare plays a year, and they loved it all very much. Some people were incredulous. It's not possible, they responded. Children just aren't up to that. But they are, if the door is opened. There is only one problem that I can see. The adult, whether teacher or parent, has to be able to enjoy and understand what he or she is reading with the children. When a child myself, I once took my 2-year-old brother to visit a poor elderly peasant woman in a hovel of a chalet in Switzerland. I chatted with her in French, but her eyes opened in disbelief as the young child conversed with me in lively English. She turned to me and said with awe, "Such a young child, and he has learned English. It is so hard to learn English. He must be a genius." The person rises to understand, master, and enjoy whatever he is surrounded with in language, idea, literature, and appreciation of beauty. If you share with children the very best carefully chosen to meet their needs, they will amaze everyone. I have heard of a fascinating confirmation of this principle, a television program with which I did not myself see, but which several students at Labrie described to me, showed the work of Marva Collins, a Black American woman who obviously had an educated love and understanding of excellent literature. She became discouraged with the urban schools which were damaging the children by classifying them as failures. She opened her own home as a school, and the neighborhood children were offered real education. The nation couldn't believe what they saw. Ghetto children who were avidly into good books, who enjoyed Shakespeare as much as the little children far away in the PNEU schools in Sussex. What a challenge, what a relief. There is no normal child who will not respond to proper feeding either physically, spiritually, or mentally. It is cheering that however miserable the environment, however many limitations there are that they are to overcome or accept, the riches of good books may bring healing education. The light of new ideas and interests can be used anywhere and at any age for all persons. Books of merit are open doors to a lifetime of exploration. A friend has been working in an inner city junior high school in the USA. His students were classified as remedial. In fact, the staff treated them as beyond educational help. However, a willing publishing industry churned out endless remedial programs that cost umpteen dollars to produce. The fact that these same children had been fruitlessly working with similar materials for 8 years had not caused anybody to pause and reflect. My friend took the impossible ones and closed the doors. The workbooks gathered dust, but in the quietness you could hear a pin drop. What was going on? He is reading a really good book out loud. They're trapped, interested, wanting to know what happens next in the story. Oh no, the bell has rung. Why are we here on such short time? My friend also gave children help in learning to read themselves. He was rewarded. They were having discussions in class. The discussions stimulated thinking. They're sharp, says my friend. Later on, he found to his astonishment that those kids had been borrowing and reading the same books. Charlotte Mason's ideas are especially needed by deprived children today, the ones who are bored. It is a challenge to us to keep alive the eagerness the 9-month-old displays when a cupboard is left open. Life is just too interesting for boredom.